In 1988, Michael Jackson stopped mid-concert when he decided to read a letter that had been delivered backstage. What he read aloud would leave 20,000 fans in complete silence and reduce the king of pop to tears. The letter was from a terminally ill fan who had just days to live, and their final words contained a message so powerful that it shattered Michael's composure in front of the entire world. But what could a dying stranger have possibly written that broke down the man who seemed invincible on stage? The air inside Madison Square Garden crackles with electric anticipation as 20,000 voices rise in unison, chanting his name like a prayer. Michael! 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 The thunderous roar reverberates through the concrete corridors backstage, where fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across cluttered equipment cases and coiled cables snaking along the floor. Steam rises from coffee cups abandoned by crew members who've been working since dawn, their nervous energy palpable as they make final adjustments to lighting rigs and soundboards. Michael Jackson stands in the wings, his silhouette barely visible against the backdrop of organized chaos. The sequin details of his iconic jacket catch fragments of stage light that leak through the heavy curtains, creating tiny stars that dance across the darkness. His breathing is controlled, measured, but tonight carries an unusual tension, a weight that seems to press down on his shoulders as he closes his eyes and listens to the crowd's desperate hunger for connection. The backstage area pulses with pre-show ritual. Dancers stretch their limbs against concrete walls, their movements creating a hypnotic rhythm that contrasts with the mechanical preparations surrounding them. Guitar technicians tune instruments with religious precision while backup singers practice scales, their voices weaving haunting harmonies that float above the controlled pandemonium. Every person backstage moves with purpose, each playing their part in the elaborate machine that creates magic for paying customers. Frank Dilio, his manager, approaches with a manila envelope tucked under his arm, his face etched with the kind of concern that comes from years of protecting an artist who's become larger than life. "Michael, this came marked urgent," he says, his voice barely audible above the crowd's roar. Security almost didn't let it through, but the return address. He trails off, studying Michael's face for any sign of recognition. The envelope feels heavier than it should in Michael's hands, the paper slightly worn as if it's traveled a great distance. His name is written across the front in shaky handwriting, the kind that speaks of either extreme youth or failing health. There's something about the way the letters slant that makes him pause, makes him forget for a moment about the thousands of people waiting just beyond the curtain. The return address shows a hospital in Ohio, and the postmark is recent enough to suggest urgency. 5 minutes, Michael. The stage manager's voice cuts through the ambient noise like a blade, snapping everyone back to the reality of showtime. The energy backstage shifts into overdrive as final preparations accelerate. Costume assistants make last-minute adjustments to sequin gloves and patent leather shoes, while sound engineers conduct final mic checks that echo through hidden speakers. Michael looks at the envelope once more, then carefully tucks it into the inner pocket of his jacket, right over his heart. The paper crinkles softly against the fabric as he moves, a sound that will stay with him throughout the first half of the show. He takes a deep breath, feeling the familiar transformation begin, the shift from man to icon, from Michael to the king of pop. But tonight, something tells him that transformation might not be complete. Tonight, the man and the icon might collide in ways he never expected. The stage explodes in a cascade of light and sound as Michael emerges from the darkness, his presence commanding every eye in Madison Square Garden. The opening beats of "Wanna Be Startin' Somethin'" pound through the massive speakers, and the crowd erupts into a frenzy that borders on religious ecstasy. Bodies press against barriers, hands reach toward the stage like desperate prayers seeking absolution, and cameras flash in rapid succession, capturing moments that will be treasured for decades. The choreography is flawless, each movement precise and practiced, but tonight feels different somehow. But beneath the spectacle, beneath the precise choreography and flawless vocal delivery, Michael carries the weight of recent months that have tested his faith in the very audience that adores him. The tabloid headlines have grown more vicious, more invasive, painting him as everything from eccentric to dangerous. Sleep has become elusive, arriving only in brief intervals between interviews where he's forced to defend his humanity against accusations that chip away at his soul like water eroding stone. The constant scrutiny has created a fortress around his heart that even his music struggles to penetrate. The letter in his jacket pocket seems to pulse against his chest as he moves through The Way You Make Me Feel, each step choreographed to perfection but lacking their usual emotional resonance. He's performed these songs hundreds of times, felt the rush of connection with audiences across the world, but lately, the distance between performer and person has grown into a chasm that threatens to swallow him whole. The screaming fans see Michael Jackson, the icon, the myth, but who sees the man who still reads every piece of fan mail, who still believes in the power of music to heal wounded hearts? The show flows seamlessly from song to song, each transition engineered for maximum impact. Pyrotechnics explode on cue, backup dancers execute complex routines with military precision, and Michael's voice soars over orchestral arrangements that have been refined through countless rehearsals. Yet beneath this polished exterior, he feels increasingly disconnected from the very art form that once saved him, that once made him feel most alive and authentic. During a brief costume change, he catches his reflection in a backstage mirror, the familiar face that's been scrutinized, analyzed, and criticized by millions of strangers who claim to know him. His fingers unconsciously touch the envelope's outline through his jacket, wondering what words wait inside. What voice has traveled across distance and circumstance to reach him in this moment of professional triumph and personal uncertainty? The mirror reflects not just his physical image, but years of accumulated pain masked by glittering costumes and practiced smiles. The second half of the show begins with Human Nature, and as the gentle melody fills Madison Square Garden, Michael feels something shift inside his chest. The familiar words suddenly feel weighted with significance, each line about human connection resonating with a depth that surprises him. The audience sways in unison, countless individual hearts beating to the same rhythm, and for a moment, the barrier between stage and seats dissolves into a connection both primal and authentic. It's then that he remembers the envelope, still pressed against his heart, like a secret waiting to be revealed. The crowd continues singing along, their voices creating a cathedral of sound that seems to demand honesty, authenticity, truth from the man they've elevated to godlike status. In this moment of profound connection with his audience, Michael feels an overwhelming urge to share genuine emotion, a moment beyond the choreographed perfection they expect. The final notes of Human Nature fade into the expectant silence of 20,000 held breaths, and Michael finds himself standing alone at the center of the stage, bathed in a single spotlight that seems to isolate him from everything except the envelope burning against his chest. His hand moves without conscious thought, fingers slipping inside his jacket to retrieve the letter that has haunted him throughout the performance. The paper feels fragile between his fingers, almost precious, as he unfolds it under the harsh stage lights. "I want to share something with you tonight." His voice carries across Madison Square Garden with unusual softness, causing the crowd to lean forward as one organism desperate to catch every word. The usual energy of a Michael Jackson concert shifts into an atmosphere more intimate, more dangerous, as if everyone present senses they're about to witness something unscripted and therefore precious. Security guards exchange uncertain glances from their positions along the stage perimeter, unsure whether to intervene or allow this deviation from the carefully planned show. Michael's eyes scan the handwritten words, and his voice begins strong and clear as he reads aloud the opening lines about a young fan's love for his music. But as the letter progresses, as the writer reveals their terminal diagnosis and describes listening to Man in the Mirror during chemotherapy sessions, his composure fundamentally breaks. His voice wavers, catching on words that suddenly carry the weight of a life he's never met, but somehow touched across impossible distances. Each sentence becomes more difficult to speak as the fan's journey unfolds before him. Madison Square Garden falls into a silence so complete that even the hum of electrical equipment seems to pause in respect. The entire arena witnesses as their beloved icon transforms before their eyes into something more vulnerable, more human than any of them expected to witness. His hand trembles as he continues reading, The letter's author describing how Michael's music provided comfort during sleepless nights in hospital rooms, how Heal the World became their anthem of hope even as their own world grew smaller and darker. Then comes the line that shatters him completely, the fans' simple statement that they won't live to see another Christmas, but wanted Michael to know that his voice was the last beautiful thing they would hear before letting go. The words hang in the air like a prayer, and Michael's composure crumbles entirely. He presses his free hand to his face, his shoulders shaking with the force of grief for a stranger who somehow became intimately connected to his soul through melody and rhythm. The crowd watches in stunned silence as their idol becomes achingly human before their eyes. Some fans begin to cry in sympathy. Others simply stare in awe at this display of raw emotion from someone they'd placed on such a high pedestal that they'd forgotten he was made of flesh and blood and breakable heart. The letter flutters slightly in the stage breeze created by the massive ventilation systems, but Michael holds it steady, treating it like the treasured message it represents. His tears fall freely now, each drop glistening like scattered diamonds, and the silence stretches on, pregnant with the kind of truth that only emerges when all pretense falls away. Time seems suspended in the garden as Michael slowly lowers the letter, his face still wet with tears that refuse to stop flowing. The silence has become a living thing, breathing with the collective heartbeat of the massive crowd who came expecting entertainment and found themselves witnesses to something far more profound. He walks to the edge of the stage, his movements unsteady but purposeful, and sits down with his legs dangling over the side, bringing himself closer to the audience than any choreographed routine ever could. Her name was Sarah, he says finally, his voice barely above a whisper, but somehow carrying to every corner of Madison Square Garden. She was 19 years old, and she wrote this letter 3 days before she died. The words hit the audience like physical blows, and a ripple of quiet sobs begins to spread through the crowd. Parents pull their children closer. Teenagers who came to scream and dance find themselves confronting mortality in ways they never expected, and adults who thought they understood the power of music discover new depths to that understanding. Michael looks out at the sea of faces, no longer seeing fans or audience members, but fellow human beings united in the fragile, temporary miracle of existence. His security team hovers nearby, uncertain and protective, but he waves them back with a gentle gesture that speaks of a man who has found something more important than safety in this moment of shared vulnerability. The letter rests in his lap like a bridge connecting two souls across the divide of mortality. She said my music helped her feel less alone. Michael continues, his voice growing stronger with each word. But the truth is, all of you help me feel less alone too. Every time you sing along, every time you let the music into your hearts, you're keeping something alive that's bigger than any one person. The audience offers not wild cheers but reverent, sustained applause that sounds more like prayer than celebration, a recognition of the sacred space that has opened between artist and audience. Rising slowly from the stage edge, Michael walks back to the microphone, the letter still trembling in his grasp. This next song is for Sarah, and for everyone who finds hope in melody when the world feels too heavy to bear. The opening chords of Heal the World begin to play, but tonight the song carries new weight, new meaning, as if it's being performed for the first time. Michael's voice wraps around each word with deliberate tenderness, and the crowd joins in with voices softened by tears and transformed by understanding. As the song builds to its climax, an extraordinary moment unfolds in Madison Square Garden. The entire audience's voices merge into something larger than the sum of their parts, creating a sound that feels like healing itself. Michael closes his eyes and lets the moment wash over him, knowing that this is why he performs, why he creates, why he continues despite the cost to his own soul. When the final note fades, he carefully folds the letter and places it back over his heart. "Thank you, Sarah," he whispers into the microphone, and 20,000 voices whisper back, "Thank you, Sarah," creating an echo that will live forever in the memories of everyone present. A reminder that music's greatest power lies not in entertainment, but in its ability to connect human hearts across any distance, even death itself.